Aston Villa fans, it's your turn on the focus today. I'm going to be looking at 7 targets who your club are looking at and the possibility of you signing them. What is the likelihood of you bringing these guys to Villa Park next season? What is going to be one of the biggest summers ever seen at Aston Villa? Before we get on and talk about it though, please make sure you hit subscribe. It really helps us out, and obviously it really gives us encouragement to keep bringing you the latest news and transfers as we get them here on Football Insider. After Matteo Alemany has changed tact and come from Barcelona to Aston Villa, we do know that there is going to be a heavy focus on the Spanish market this summer from Unai Emery and his recruitment team. Villa are set out to spend probably around £200 million in the summer, all going to plan of course, and if all those targets come off, almost strengthening in every area of the pitch, from defence to midfield to that man up front. Yes, you've got Ollie Watkins firing goals for fun, but they still want another striker. So let's work back to front and tell you who your club, Villa fans, are looking at in the summer. Let's talk about Pau Torres, 26-year-old defender who actually is out of contract in a year's time, June 2024. His contract expires. Villarreal are currently trying to get a new deal across the line with him. They want to secure their centre-back for the long-term future. However, there's high interest in Pau Torres, and our understanding is Aston Villa are one of those clubs who would be keen to bring him to England. There will be multiple clubs looking at him from around Europe and the UK, but Unai Emery obviously has an in there and has a great relationship with the player and has earmarked him to the recruitment staff as someone he wants to bring to Villa Park. You could be looking at around €50 million for Pau Torres, even though he's in the last year of his deal, because Villarreal will not sell him for cheap. They value him extremely highly. My understanding also is that Pau Torres would look to make that move now, that big move that is ready for him at 26 years old. Time not running out, but certainly time maybe for him to take that next step, and Aston Villa would be seen as that. Depends where they end up in the league, obviously. If they get European football, we shall wait and see. That will certainly add a string to their bow in terms of bringing players like Torres in, but the future looks bright under Unai Emery, the current ownership and the new director of football. One player that has been heavily linked over and over again, Villa fans, I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing about it, is Calvin Phillips at Manchester City. Obviously, things haven't gone so well for him since his move from Leeds United. He struggled with injury and he's actually only made 8 Premier League appearances, still makes the World Cup squads and Gareth Southgate's England squads, and is highly regarded as a fantastic player. He's actually put up there with Declan Rice by those who coach him and work with him. Obviously, the difference between him and Rice is playing games and showing his ability. Phillips hasn't been able to do that. He's on a long-term deal at Manchester City. 2028 his contract expires. But the fact that he could leave is getting higher and higher. It's more and more realistic that he could. Manchester City will strengthen again in that position. We do believe they did want Bellingham in the centre of the park. They could be in the Declan Rice race, and Calvin Phillips' game time might drop again significantly, even though he's had hardly any of it. There are a number of clubs who would be keen to bring him, but Aston Villa would like another man in there who can help out Luiz in the middle of the park and help strengthen that area of the pitch. Although he is contracted till 2028, Man City may look to regain that £50 million fee that they paid for him at least. It could even be a loan with an option on it, because they need to get him game time. He needs to be playing football, and if he goes to Villa on loan and they have perhaps an option which it goes both ways with both clubs or something like that, that happens quite often. An option to buy doesn't necessarily mean the club are definitely going to get him. It just means that there's an option open to the door to have the conversation a lot of the time. Perhaps something like that for Calvin Phillips. We do expect him to be leaving Manchester City as more and more likely as the weeks roll on, and Aston Villa would be keen to bring someone in that position in central midfield. We do understand that Calvin Phillips has been looked at and is a potential option for Unai Emery. But of course the forward areas are going to be key, despite the great time the attackers are having at Aston Villa right now. Wingers is something the club are looking at. Coutinho could be likely to leave the club as well. Keep an eye out for that, despite the Brazilian being what he once was at Liverpool. Has moved from Barcelona to Villa under Steven Gerrard. Just hasn't really materialised into maybe what people thought Coutinho would bring. So look out for Coutinho coming off the wage bill, because he's got a massive wage as well to cover. But what about Harvey Barnes? Harvey Barnes will leave Leicester City this summer. It's very, very likely, whether they stay up or go down, that he will. If they go down, he's 100% going to leave the King Power Stadium. If they stay up, it's still very likely that he will. A number of clubs have looked at him. Newcastle have looked at him. Spurs have looked at him. But of course, Villa have looked at him too. The Leicester winger has been brilliant for Leicester considering their position. He has still scored 12 Premier League goals this season, which isn't to be sniffed at in such a struggling side. Contracted till 2025 and obviously only 25 years old. A player that has shown so much promise, potential and ability in the past, and that's still there. He's just in a struggling team. There will be offers for Harvey Barnes come the summer, and we expect Villa to be in about those, especially if they can get the likes of Coutinho off the wage bill and free up more funds and FFP wiggle room, probably around £40 million, 35 to £40 million for Harvey Barnes, and that again could change if Leicester drop into the Championship, because they'll be looking to recoup fees for players. They'll be looking to get some funds to get them back into the Premier League. The Foxes obviously very, very close to relegation now, so key players like Barnes, like Maddison, Tielemans, who's obviously out of contract, etc., all become available. And my understanding is movement for Barnes is becoming more and more likely, with Villa heavily monitoring his situation. An interesting one is Ferran Torres at Barcelona. Now, this would be a very hard deal to do. He has played 29 times for Barcelona in La Liga this season as they are on their way to win the league in Spain. He's also keen to play Champions League football, to play at a top club and to play in Europe. I know Barcelona haven't been there, but they will be next season. He is contracted till 2027 and there isn't a major rush for him to get out the door. Although things haven't quite gone perfectly to plan for him, there's no major pull for Ferran Torres to leave Barcelona at this point of time. And if he does, I think a Champions League club is more likely. You've got to remember he's come from a title-winning Manchester City side into Barcelona, and whether he'd go down to Villa, well, that's actually something that's debatable right now. I think it would take a big bit of work to get him from Barcelona. If they do, phenomenal bit of deal to get done. You're still looking at around, again, that €60 million mark for someone like Ferran Torres on a deal till 2027 too. He's still, like I said, played 29 times, still a player that gets game time at Barcelona in one of the top leagues in the world, and is set to play Champions League football with them next season. A very, very difficult deal to get done. Someone the club have looked at. A number of clubs have looked at him, of course. He's still extremely talented, and he's only 23 years old, a player that you could sign up for a long time and is still going to get better, which is very, very exciting. But Barcelona will well be aware of that as well, with the likes of Ansu Fati and other players, Rafinha, who could potentially leave the club. They might not be keen to sell so many of their stars. A really, really interesting one is Marco Asensio, and this might seem a bit mad considering the talent of the guy, but he is out of contract in 2023, and there's been many clubs who would be keen to bring him in. Of course they would. Still played 27 times, got 8 goals for Real Madrid in the league this season, but with his contract expiring, there's more and more chance of him moving on. Real Madrid are going to strengthen with, obviously, they've secured Jude Bellingham. They're just agreeing a fee with Dortmund as we speak. They may even bring one more in that area. Look out for the likes of Olmo and others who could potentially come in. And that leaves someone like Asensio free. And again, this might seem mad, but you've seen Villa do this before. They are a club that can pull off big moves. They do attract big names, and people need to remember that. It's not the first time they would have done something like this. However, I do think that competition for Asensio, if he is not to sign the new deal with Real Madrid, if he is 100% going to leave the Bernabeu, will be massively high. And the amount of Champions League clubs who will offer him the chance to play there will be probably too much for Asensio to look at the likes of an Aston Villa. Although they might go for it, they might believe in themselves, you've got to look at the likes of an Arsenal. You've got to look at the likes of Inter, AC, teams in Italy who will be keen to bring Asensio in too. And don't forget Spain. Also, there's also been links to even a switch to Barcelona, which you've not seen since Luis Figo-esque days, So yeah, very hard deal for Villa to do this one. Although they might be in the mix and they might go for it, a guy that can play right wing, left wing, attacking midfielder, central midfielder would be an incredible acquisition for Aston Villa, but would be a very, very hard deal to do, even if he is on a free. Of course, Aston Villa still want another striker despite Ollie Watkins' phenomenal form, and we're going to get onto their main target in a second, but we need to talk about one man. This is a man that they inquired about in January from Lyon, and that is Moussa Dembele. The former Celtic man will leave Lyon at the end of the season. His contract is expiring. He is a free agent. There is interest in him in Italy as we speak. He is in talks with a number of clubs in Italy who have offered their services to him and asked him to join them next season. However, he does have major interest in England. Look at those teams around the bottom of the relegation zone. That is certainly who are looking at him. Look at the likes of Leeds United, for example. If they survive, you can expect them to go for a Dembele. But this is a player that was looked at by Aston Villa in January, inquired about by Aston Villa in January, so it wasn't just a sniff. They were interested in potentially bringing him to Villa Park, and the fact he's on a free and a proven goal scorer, despite only getting the 3 goals in Liga 1 this year, where it's been in the past, the likes of Celtic and Lyon in the past, he's scored goals. A player that has played at the highest level, played in the Champions League, in my understanding, wants to move to England. He wants an English move. So the clubs in Italy might be more pressing in offering deals, and maybe there's more uncertainty with certain clubs who want him in England where they're going to be next season. If the option to play in England comes up, Moussa Dembele will move to England. You can guarantee that. And that makes him more and more a viable option for Aston Villa. However, if they land their target that they want, that's come up in the last couple of days, certainly moving a lot faster now, and that is Dusan Vlahovic, then maybe Dembele misses out. Yep, Dusan Vlahovic is set to leave Juventus in the window. There's absolutely no doubt about the fact that he is available to transfer. Juventus has obviously had a bit of a mad season with points deductions and allegations and courts and hearings, and also now back in the Champions League positions again, and could still be playing in the Champions League and still in a European competition right now. But Dusan Vlahovic is unlikely to stay, we do understand. He's ready to go, and Juventus are ready to allow him to go too. Contracted until 2026. I think you're looking at around 65 to 70 million euros for Dusan Vlahovic at this point. Even though he wants to leave and he's available, Juventus will still try to get top dollar for their asset, as is their right. He's a proven goal scorer where he's been before when he was at Fiorentina, and obviously now to Juventus. He is keen to play in the Premier League. He's keen to play at a European club in the Premier League. I've not heard Champions League specifically, but keen to play at a club that's challenging or playing in Europe as well in the Premier League. I'd also look out for West Ham here as well, but Aston Villa very, very, very keen on doing a deal for Dusan Vlahovic. You could see a few players leave Villa Park. That's a different video to make room for these transfers. But like I said, it's a big window for Unai Emery. A big window for Aston Villa fans. They are trying to kick on. This isn't a one-season hit. The board there, the owners there, the new director of football, as I spoke about, Unai Emery want to kick on and make Aston Villa a club that are challenging. They have a massive amount of wealth, Aston Villa, at the football club. Their owners are not skint, but it goes under the radar because we're talking a lot about the likes of City and Newcastle and Chelsea and co. Villa have money, and they're going to spend big. So make sure you like and subscribe here so that you're aware and available and ready for when that news comes in. Thanks for watching. Fraser Fletcher, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.